So my name is Purush, and I've been with MASB for about 7 years now. Jim got me into it, and I got hooked on it from ever since. I wanted to start out with a little bit of a shout out for my institute, because my colleague Scott Rex is right here. A little bit of a background on the institute. The Northwestern Mutual Data Science Institute got its start in 2018 with a generous grant of $15 million from Northwestern Mutual Company. To which we meaning the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, added $12.5 million. Scott's University added 12.5, and for a total of $40 million, with the goal of starting up and running and building data science programs in the region as a means of attracting employees to the region, and also advancing research in data science. And so we did that over the last 5 years. We got 2 degree programs started at our university. A lot of research going on in data science, advancing data science as well. I'll talk about that. And perhaps based on the progress that we made, just about 2 months ago, we got another $35 million. So now we are a $75 million business. So we now have all the pressure of a startup that's growing. And so we actually had a day-long meeting yesterday at Northwestern Mutual, starting at 8 o'clock, ending at 8 o'clock, talking about what we're going to do for the next 5 years to build it up. And we're looking to add more companies as partners, more universities, more research, and so on. So I just wanted to kind of give that background. And that's where my chaired professorship comes from. Northwestern Mutual, part of the $15 million went into $5 million for an endowment, which supports my pay now. And I'm also the co-director for UWM for the Institute. So that's the background on the Institute. So the talk today is about unstructured data, and because of the fact that I'm related so closely to data science, I'm doing a lot of work with data science and unstructured data in marketing. And this very first slide that I'm showing, I have to shamelessly admit, goes entirely to the credit of Dave right here. Dave and Vitala and Venki and I are working on this big data project that Frank mentioned. We are trying to come up with a paper that kind of takes the mystery out of big data and unstructured data for practitioners. What is big data? What is unstructured data? What is the use case for big data? So we're kind of working on that. And in the very first meeting that we had, Dave came out forcefully and said, I don't agree with the idea of unstructured. Every data has structure. And I thought about that and I said, oh my God, that makes a lot of sense, right? In the past, structured data was all numerical data organized into tables. What we call unstructured data does have a structure. Text has structure, pictures have structure, music has structure, smell has structure, everything has a structure. So I said, I have to agree with Dave. And so I kind of borrowed from him or stole from him and put up with this first slide. So that's what I wanted to start with, that what we're calling unstructured data may actually not be unstructured. It does have a structure, and that's a structure that we can exploit to really peer deep into it and get some insights out of that. And that's what I'm going to talk about, some examples. And by unstructured data, what I'm talking about, the type of work that we are doing is 4 types of, once again, with the caveat that unstructured is not unstructured, 4 types of unstructured data: textual, video, pictorial or visual, and audio. 4 types of unstructured data. And I thought I'll share a few papers that we have published and a few papers that are going on that actually make a case for the business value of using unstructured data. And I'm going to give you 3 examples, starting with textual data, then pictorial data, then audio data, and then I'm going to give you some other projects that are ongoing with all of these kinds of data. So the first project that I'm going to, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention this. So as part of this institute start, I also have had the ability to start up what we're calling a content lab, where we have a group of faculty from different universities that have come together, some colleagues from the University of Chicago, from the University of North Carolina, from our university, and doctoral students. We get together every 2 weeks, talk about different ideas in unstructured data and problems that we can solve with business value. And we select problems that help businesses use unstructured data. And I was thinking about how I could motivate it for this group without going into my research. It's not that you need that motivation. But last week, I saw a very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, And as soon as I saw that, I went back to Frank and said, Frank, I need to update my slides. I need to include this article in the presentation. And so this is the article I'm going to show. You might have already seen this. It came last, I think, weekend in the Wall Street Journal. And it's an unbelievably powerful example of the use of unstructured. Right? We all know about Netflix, but it talks about how this data drives Netflix's entire business, from what series and shows they produce, how they negotiate with their staff. Everything is driven by this data that they're collecting on what we are watching and how long we watch for. And this is what I wanted to kind of quickly go through. It talks about how it determines how they continue a series, how many seasons they will have for that. And what struck me was that a lot of other companies are mimicking that, and this is what it closed with. The more of this data that Netflix collects and uses, the more value it can provide to its shareholders. A clear connection between data and value, which is what we're going to talk about. So I thought I'll start with that. And going back to the content lab, that's exactly what we try to do. When we meet every 2 weeks and we continue to work on projects that we already have, and we're trying to identify new projects, all of these discussions that we have to identify some really interesting ideas, but then we have to decide on which ones we're going to spend our time on. We use some criteria to select an idea. Is the idea that we're going to work on really new? Has it not been worked on? Is it something that can deliver business value to businesses? And because we're academics and scholars, the other thing that we look into is, can we bring in new theories and disciplines into this field? So rather than just going back to the same well over and over again, can we draw from, say, anthropology? Can we draw from geology? Can we draw from visual arts? Can we draw from sound theory, music theory, and on and on? So that's what we look at when we construct these problems. And some of these examples I'm going to show you are kind of built around those ideas. And we are very keen on, to the extent possible, demonstrating a causal connection between the issue that we're exploring and the insight that we are trying to provide. So the first example that I'm going to share is a paper that we worked on a few years ago, looking into the use of textual data. And I have these papers here, and I'm going to go kind of bring them up. We can go through as much of the math as you guys are interested in, or we can just kind of quickly go through that and look at the final results. And for each of these 3 papers I'm going to share, I organized it in a specific framework. I'm going to start with the problem, talk about the business value of the problem, then talk about the discipline or theory that we're drawing on for the problem, go into the paper a little bit and show you the results and business implications. That's the structure I'm going to follow for each of these 3 papers. So, and please stop me wherever you want me to answer a question, because I tend to get carried away in my classes. I just keep talking. So please feel free to stop me. So the first paper is on tweets. Maybe it's going to be threads soon. But the question that we were looking at was, can you write tweets so as to increase the number of retweets that they get? Is there a process for writing tweets to increase people's interest in retweeting those tweets? And why is that a question of business value? Because of the fact that tweets are an inexpensive way for companies to broadcast a message. You're not spending on ads. You're just putting a tweet out there. If you can get people to retweet it thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of times, you got your message out for literally nothing. So that's the business value of understanding what makes a tweet more retweetable, right? And the problem is that whenever you put a tweet out, the tweet is one of maybe 500 million tweets that are going out that day. In addition to that, take Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, our emails, our work. People are literally spending 2 or 3 seconds per tweet, or maybe less than that. So the challenge for businesses is, how do we get people to take a look at that tweet within those 1 or 2 seconds, get them interested enough to want to retweet it? That's the question that we want to really look at. And so what we thought was, when we thought to this way, we said, let's look at theory on how people read. What drives people to read something? And that led us to the discipline of psycholinguistics, which actually is a 100-year literature looking into how people read. And I didn't know this literature till I started working on this project. I didn't know that we read this way. Apparently, we read text never continuously. We focus on something, we jump away from that something and go on to the later part of the text, come back to what we first looked at, go later on, come back. And so that's the pattern in which we read without realizing it. That's what we call saccades and fixations, right? So which means that in order for a tweet to attract attention, as we're going through that back and forth, that those early saccades, the first looks at something, have to grab our attention so much that we'll say, oh my God, this is something that I need to share. Which then led us to the conclusion that if somehow you can write a tweet such that early on, you can grab people's attention. Early on, meaning if the tweet is read from left to right. If early on you can grab their attention when they begin reading it, you're going to be able to generate more retweets because they're going to be interested in it if it's a topic of interest to them. So that's the idea that we started with. And I'll just bring up the paper and quickly go through some of the key parts of the paper, just so that you get a sense of what we did. So we looked at quite a few brands and categories, in all about 4 categories: autos, dining, airlines, and food and beverage. And tons of writing here in terms of what we did with the data, but overall about 14,000 tweets from 62 brands across the 4 product categories that we analyzed. And we did quite a bit of modeling and math, and essentially we took a Poisson model, ran through all of that, and I'll come to the conclusions in a moment. But going back to that idea of causality, we wanted to demonstrate that this is indeed causal, that writing a tweet in a certain way is going to cause more retweets. So we had the findings from this data, but we had to demonstrate that causality with data that we didn't have a stake in demonstrating that causality in. So we went out and looked for a different data set, which is quite actually interesting. It's a famous data set that has about 1.7 million tweets, but each of these tweets has a twin. The same tweet is written in 2 different ways, one with a certain pattern, one without that pattern. So we took that data set and literally ran through the data set to understand whether there's a causal connection between how a tweet is written and how it's retweeted. And we were able to demonstrate that causality. And at the end, what we found, what we show in the paper is that tweets that have those topic words early on in the tweet and relate and repeat those topic related words. By topic, I mean, let's say you're writing a tweet about a promotion on a new car with $1,000 incentive if you buy before January 30th. If you use, and promotion is the word related to the topic, if you use that word promotion early on and repeat the word promotion enough number of times through the tweet, that's going to grab the attention and it's going to get retweeted. That's what we showed in this paper. So that's the first paper. Any questions or comments or brickbats on this before I move on? Edgar.
This is something I'm running into regularly, which is, this is, call it at the fine line level of data that you're going and looking at. How are you seeing that rolling up to more strategic decisions? Is that more from, call it like instructional of like, I want these types of outcomes consistent with our business strategy, and then the organization works through marketing and data to achieve it? Like, how do you...
strategic objectives, what you mean?
Well, so I very much value the power of what you can go and do with this. But if you kind of have a directive coming out from, I'll kind of refer to what Mark said in his fireside chat, right? You have a business strategy, and the role of the marketing and the data teams and the sales teams is to go and, in their function, fulfill on it. Where does this live? Like, who uses it at this level of granularity? Is this used at the CMO layer? Is this used at the VP layer? Is this used at the data analyst layer? Because this is where I'm trying to wrap my head around as to bring this into strategic thinking in an organization?
Very good. Excellent question. So the way I would address that question is, and this kind of goes back to the project that Vitala, Dave, Venki, and I are working on to convey the value of this big data to the top suite. So right now, I don't think a CMO gives a shit about tweets. They don't care. But if you are able to demonstrate that this can actually increase the ROI of investment into the marketing team, getting one more person to actually work on writing tweets, and a person who's capable of writing tweets in a way that they'll be noticed more, that's going to start the process of increasing the ROI on marketing investments. That's how I would make the connection.
I think you almost have to look at it deconstructively,
Yeah.
right? And start with the strategy layer and back down from that. And there's always going to be a point at which something either works or doesn't work, right, in terms of supporting the strategy. Because it might very well be that written, I mean, I think your research is great, right? So it could totally be supportive. It could also be a rounding error on something. Right?
Sure.
And so that's I mean, certainly at a functional level, right, the person who's managing Twitter can make them more effective.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, does that function?
Know what upstairs is looking for. Yeah. Above the line, Jim.
But no, I think that's a great comment, Mark. I think in the next paper, where we are actually going to look at pictorial data, I'm going to show how it could be much more than a rounding error. There could be much bigger returns. And
and you know what? It probably would vary according to the business situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can't really make a blanket statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe to this point, strategic decisions, right? So I've been working with UPS in Germany, and of course DHL is my endowment sponsor. So with DHL, what they started like 8 years ago is creating data lakes across all functions and all business units. And because everything they do has a number, right? Because they send it from A to B. And be it containers, be it freight, be it everything. And so they started combining it, and then they have started out producing little insights, but all of them tied to $1 million impacts. And a $1 billion company, $1 million is like, okay, nice. But when they saw and then what they did is we presented these AI and whatever kind of things on the way to the main canteen of the headquarters, so that people could engage and see the potential across all functions from the data lake. And so this is actually most of the profits that you see increasing in DHL are coming out of this data lake and increasingly strategic decisions.
Yeah.
Because you can connect all the dots increasingly. Right? But that's like a 10-year venture at least. It's still a process ongoing. So I think showing these small things is so important, and then having the imagination now think you can connect all these dots.
You just touched upon something very critical, which is the imagination, which is different from the copycatting. Because you're going and seeing a lot of copycatting happening in industries like, oh my gosh, look at them, that company went on Instagram. We need to go on Instagram. It's like you're going and selling B2B widgets that are going used to, get stuff out of the ground. That's not really.
But the point that you're making, Case, I think a critical point addresses the question that Edgar raised. I think the more of these small dots that we can put into that data lake, the more of a bigger picture will emerge, right?
Right?
Yes.
The more you add, exponentially you learn.
Yes. It takes time.
It takes time, yeah.
It's not going to happen tomorrow.
No.
So these are tweets from the brand account, correct? So that's the variation within those accounts. How do those accounts compare to what they would do with influencer marketing, for example? So the brand is, I'm going to have a partnership with whatever musician, athlete, and they put it out on their Instagram account, but it's Toyota or whatever those brands.
So you're saying, how does tweeting compare to an influencer promotion? Is that the question?
Would be same, I'm just thinking about if you're trying to, what the goals are.
Yeah, it's the
Sort of
same,
like
it's the same
quantitative
medium,
versus
different trigger.
qualitative
Right.
outcome, right?
Yeah.
Because if your goal is just to get more eyeballs on it because somebody's famous, that's one thing. But if they're a really bad person, let's just say, right, then you've done yourself qualitative damage with some portion of the population, right? So it really depends.
Because Purush, I'm guessing this is outside the scope of what you're specifically looking
Yeah.
at, but I'd be interested to know, are there certain ways you can tweet that helps you avoid negative retweets?
I really do that.
And I'm sure that's the answer you did, but it's kind of becoming an issue.
We only look at this number, but not the direction of the mix.
Yeah.
I think you have to also say that it's tough, if something like a RT has very limited value, right? Optimizing it, spending a lot of time optimizing it is a highly contextual thing, right?
Let's address that point to the next two. So this is the next project I'm going to talk about using pictorial data, which is obviously on a much larger scale. And this is a paper that came out in this journal, Quantitative Marketing and Economics, a few years ago. And what we looked at here was the following question, right? Online retailing obviously depends on display of products on websites, right? And the problem is that there's only so much real estate on a page. And there are thousands of pictures that you can put up for the products. Question is, what kind of pictures will do the trick? What should the pictures have in terms of the colors they have, in terms of content they have? That's the question that we try to address here, right? And the idea was that if you have the right pictures, they're going to draw the people in, they're going to get them interested in the products, get them deeper into the retail side. So you need to get them started on that journey. What pictures will do the trick, right? So once again, going back to the theory that in this paper that we looked at was color theory. What kind of colors get people to notice a picture? And once again, this is a discipline with more than 100 years of history, a lot of findings. And one of the key findings that has come out over and over again is that the color blue gets people to notice something. And it has this calming effect. Color red has this exciting effect. And so different colors have different effects on people in terms of how they react. And different colors have different effects on people in terms of how they like something and want to interact with that. And that's what we try to build on. And what we did was we took pictures displayed by a lot of retailers. So I'll show you some examples of sites that we looked at. So here is one example, right? Which picture is better to display these shoes? What type of picture will do the trick to get people interested in this product, right? And tons of retailers, and I have the description somewhere here. And we looked at all of the features of the pictures in terms of the colors. These are Instagram pictures also. What kind of filters were used? Let me actually ask you a quick question talking about filters. Exactly the same picture with different filters. Can you take a guess at which of these would actually attract people's attention?
Third?
Third from the left on top?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other guesses?
The Mayfair one, first and the second line.
Which one? Right?
The first one and the second line.
Oh, Mayfair? Okay.
Mayfair.
Okay.
I'll pick the second one and the second one.
I don't mean this to be a quiz, but I'm curious what you think.
I'm with Edgar. The third one on the
Or it might be the last one. It's got
Third one on the top right,
saturation.
Hudson?
on the top right. Yeah.
Okay.
We were all wrong.
Of course.
answers.
I'm looking for the right answer. And I'll tell you why it's the right answer, because that's what the data shows.
I would retweet that.
Any other guesses? One final guess. The last one? Last on the top? Bottom? X-Pro 2? X-Pro 2, okay. X-Pro 2, okay. I think you got one of those. Yeah. Actually, what we find is that low fee and X-Pro 2 are the ones that attract the most attention. And you can kind of see why. And there's a nice contrast here, and they kind of stand out, the watches, right? That's what we find. And so tons of analysis. It took us 5 years to get this paper in. All kinds of questions came up. We had to demonstrate causality. That was really the colors that were doing the trick. And I'll go back to the presentation to tell you what we found. So what we found is that in order to get people to want to look at a picture, take a look at the product and get into the retail site from that picture, you want to kind of reduce the tones of red and cyan. It's somewhat of a green, but increase the real green. But interestingly, increase the depth of red and blue. Not just the amount of red and blue, but the depth of red and blue. That's what we found. And essentially what you're saying is that you'll see actually what I mean if you look at this. We have this in the paper. If your target, you want to have something like this and not like that. And when you look, at least for me, when I look at these two pictures, for me it makes sense what our results show, right? And we then took it, and going back to the question of whether it's a rounding error or more than that, the company that we were working with, the startup out of Columbia, as we were working on this paper, they were working with Instagram, which was then bought by Facebook. And so this company took our findings to Facebook and said, hey, we are working with these guys. They got these results. Do you want to try these out in your ads? Facebook agreed and actually ran their ads based on our findings. And these are results from the Facebook implementation that they report in the paper. Just 1 day of changes in ads. This is the increase in revenue. With changes in the type of pictures displayed in ads on Facebook. And this is what convinced the reviewers that we had something here. This one table, right? So going back to Mark's point, and I'm not taking issue with that, there are cases where, depending on the context, as you said, this kind of research can really add business value. Right? Yes.
I'm assuming you looked at more than color. There must have been other dimensions. There's
In
level
this
of
paper,
zoom.
we only looked at color.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about where we're looking at other dimensions in other products.
Yeah, Purush, I do have to say though that another one of the MASB projects is the creativity project, which Dave will be speaking with. But these are the kind of things where you're showing how an aspect of a form of ad, a picture, can have an effect. There are people in the marketing industry who question whether there's any difference between creative. Mm-hmm. And so it's just remarkable to see when you talk about one aspect, this is incremental, as opposed to just having a strong creative unit come in. So I think this is really fundamental because it drives home the point that even small changes to creative can have substantial differences.
I'm convinced with all of these years that for the last 10 years, I've been working with unstructured data. The one bottom line that I'm convinced of is that small things can make big differences in content. That's what I feel. Very good.
I have a question about, because I'm running into a major issue with the C-suite on the use of structured versus unstructured data to inform strategy. And what I kind of have had to start reverting to is just say, look, just view unstructured data as information that hasn't been organized yet.
Right, yeah, that's going back to Dave's point, right?
Because I think people think that it is useless. They're taking that as the interpretation of it, where in fact it's actually the exact opposite. It's that if you spend some time investing into it, but there's a lot of dismissiveness. I've seen a lot of the use of big data as being poo-pooed now in organizations. They just don't want to go through the headache of it or something like that.
That's exactly what they're trying to address in the paper.
Hey, if a data scientist thinks that data cleansing is boring and not fun, imagine how a marketer feels about it.
This took 5 years to go through peer review.
Is structure. By definition, there has to be a structure to capture data. It may be the wrong structure for the decision that you want to make. In fact, that's the problem with all the data scientists. They're very good at collecting data for the wrong
Or it might
purpose.
be useless data relative to the question at hand.
Or you may have lacked the creativity to know what the heck to do with it.
Yes.
So I go back to something that happened to me about 12 years ago with an undergrad student from Kettering University in computer science, and he had to do a 5th-year project. He's working at FedEx, and he's looking for, like, what do we do? And they said, well, we throw all this data out. We know where your packages are, but once it's delivered, we throw it out. And he said, could I just play with that? And he wrote a program to look for anomalies. So if you, the biggest issue they have is theft. So if you said, oh, by the way, you've got conveyor belt A, B, C, D, and it's going on the truck A, B, C, D, and he's looking at all this data that's just constantly thrown out, and he's like, why is it something from A is going on to truck C? And so he actually created a program by looking at those anomalies to trigger an early detection on theft. And it's like, do you think he got an offer? For full-time employment with just one little idea? So it's not just how it's structured, but what you think the value is in that data that's there, that creativity.
I think it's up to us to bring that structure out.
I totally today's point. It's because I had the luxury to build the internet and other pipes with some technicians in Germany at the time as my first job. And this data is not unstructured as well as, like you say, it is structured for a technical purpose. Like, it actually originates from a technical process usually, right? And it's never meant to be used in a business context. So that's the translation that you have to do. Now, which data to collect is an interesting question, right? So you need a whole business sense to see, like, what's the value of potentially falsely structured data in that sense, right? And as you say, there's so much information there for business, so many things, like a process, content, strategy. It's just like a firm needs this big picture of what kind of data it has, what it collects, and of course it's not meant to be combined with others, but this is exactly like, as you say, right? You have so many data sources, or let's say different occasions where you collect data, you have to be able to make it talk with each other and match it.
The other issue they have on the structure is who's doing the structuring and under what premise.
Yeah, for what?
So even if you're a data provider, a lot of times there's structure that's provided in it based on what they believe clients want to be able to see. So I'll use social media as an example of that. Well, we want to see positives and negatives, and we're more interested in positives. Well, you have a certain velocity of conversation that's occurring with mixed sentiment. So I love the Volt, I hate the price. It's both good and bad. So it's either arbitrarily moved into positive or negative, or it's thrown aside. Now, having done work with that very contradictory data, it's most predictive of when somebody's going to take an action. Why would that be? They're saying, yoo-hoo, I'm trying to resolve a conflict. I therefore am open to change. Instead of me looking for a big audience and I'm going to change a bunch of people's mind that I can't, I got a small metric of people that are actually saying, yoo-hoo, look at me. Okay? And nobody pays attention to it because it's tough and it's small. The returns are huge. If you were a marketer, you'd be looking for those people. But the data provider, by the nature of the very structure, is that, no, we hear people want to know, like, how much is positive versus negative, and we'll focus on that, and we'll organize our data that way.
You had a psychological insight. Right, so you had a psychological insight about customers. So what Purush has done, to me is most impressive, is to systematize the creation of insights by looking interdisciplinary way across all those disciplines. Right? So not just like, so that there may be, so that that's to me was the.
That's so enjoyable for me. I mean, getting away from marketing, talking about anthropology and color theory, it's fun. There's a lot we got from it.
Yeah.
But maybe a final thing, like, and I'm with Mark, like, there's only one business strategy, right? So now what we see in a lot of companies with this unstructured big data is more like a bottom-up composition of these different data sources. But what the board job would be is to have a digital map of the whole business model, like from production to the very end. And how do we actually put the most important parts together, right?
Hold that thought.
Let me just quickly run through it then. So I just want to address Nikhil's comment about whether we're looking at other things. So I'm going to show some quick examples of what we're doing. We're looking at, in another paper, whether pictures should have faces or not. And this paper is at an advanced stage at a top-tier journal to be published, this paper. And what we find here is that when retailers display products, pictures that show people's faces are counterproductive. It's better to show a picture with a product without showing the person's face like here. Because what our theory is that, and it goes back to anthropology, we as humans are wired to focus on a person's face when you see a picture. So if there's a picture of a product with a person with a model's face visible, we're going to spend more time on the face rather than on the product. So if you want to sell more, don't include the person's face.
What if the face is Tom Brady's?
Pardon me?
What if the face?
It's even worse. It's even worse. Because you're going to spend time on the product.
Oh no!
Really?
Oh no! Now I want to know. Influencer sponsorships versus products.
Very quickly, other things. We're also looking at what products should look like, whether they should be, where they should be located in the picture. Should they be, for example, right in the middle? Left, right? How much should they be in focus? So all these things are going to have an effect, and that's a paper that we have that we're almost done working on. And a lot of other things. But then let me go quickly to the other type of data, which is audio data. And here, what we are looking at is the case of advertising. And this paper just came out last year in JMR. And we are looking at what is the effect of audio in ads on engagement or viewership of the ads. And the question that we're addressing here is the following. If you're able to retain more of your audiences, you're able to get your message out to more people, clearly, if they're not tuning the ad out. So if there's some way that you can play around with the audio in the ad to get to that goal, it's better for you, right? And the reason this has also become a business problem is that over time, and we show this in the paper, the advertisers have started using sound and the volume of sound as a means of attracting attention. You will notice that, right? As soon as the ad break starts, the volume goes up. And because of that, there's an act that was passed, the COM Act, that you cannot have the volume of the ad higher than the average volume of the program itself. So you can't do that. So is there a way to kind of work around that and work with the audio in the ad to increase viewership of the ad? That's the question we looked at. And what we looked at was this whole concept of audio energy. The idea of audio energy is that it's not just the volume of the sound, but all of the dynamics of the audio that constitutes its energy. How much variation there is, how much uncertainty about the sound there is, right? How mellow it is, all this constitute energy. And our theory was that the more of that energy there is, the more engaging the ad will be, and people will watch the ad. And that's what we try to test out. And I'll go through some of the parts of the paper because it's important to understand what we did. In particular, I want to show you what the data was. So this data was provided by a company called iSpot.tv, and you might have heard about that company. And it's a very impressive company, and they're essentially trying to be the alternative to AC Nielsen now. And what they do is they track about 85 million TVs every second of the day to see what's playing on the screen. And what we looked at was which ads were being watched longer once they start playing. And we looked at over 3 years of advertising data, 1 million earrings and about 27,000, I think, ads to see which ads are being watched longer once they start airing, right? That was the research. And what we found was that, surprisingly, increasing audio energy increases the viewership of the ad. More people stay on with an ad that has more of that audio energy idea. And we actually show in the paper what that translates into in terms of gained GRPs and dollar value. So there's once again business value to that unstructured data. Edgar. I'll send you the paper, you can read it up. So we actually define audio energy, and we borrowed the construct from Spotify. Spotify has, if you know, Spotify recommends music, right? Based on your viewing patterns, listening patterns. So they define audio energy in terms of things like their terms, danceability, and things like that. So they reverse engineered their measures using some data and use that to measure the audio energy in the ads. So that's what we did. It's not just about volume. That's exactly the point that we're trying to.
It's about the spacing of the rhythm and all this kind of thing. So the energy is more like in the waves, how they construct.
So just want to close with some of the other projects that we have going on, some interesting projects. We have about 18 projects going on. One group of projects is looking at what makes newspaper articles more engaging for people to want to read them more, interact with them more, and post more comments and have a discussion on them, right? And so we're looking at the dynamics of the text itself. We talked about pictures, and we have a lot of projects going on audio and advertising using iSpot's data, and likewise with the video ads as well. One of the current projects that I have, I was working on it in the morning. I'll unfortunately or fortunately confess to that. This is a paper in its final stages. It's a very interesting idea. What we were looking at was, given that every 2 years we have elections and we have massive amounts of advertising going on by politicians, what does it do to brand advertising, right? Does it hurt or help? And there's a paper that showed that brand ads that follow political ads gain by losing less of their audiences. So we wanted to explore that further, and we showed that through the political cycle, when people are more engaged with the election, brand ads that follow political ads retain more of their audiences because people watch the political ad and sit through to the next brand ad. And we are showing the same thing happens in the case of tax ads between January and April. If, for example, TurboTax advertises, and then it's followed right away by an ad for Huggies, Huggies is going to keep more of its audiences between January and April. So that's what we're able to show. And so these are some of the things we're working on. So any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer. All right, thank you.